Perfect. So welcome everyone in this room on the fourth day of Talent Garden Innovators Week as part of Vienna Up. I don't know if you know, but it's the place or the time right now to be in Vienna because there's so many events happening around technology and the innovation landscape. And I'm very thankful that you're all here. We have a full house despite of the weather. So applause to you guys, first of all. I have my hands full, but thank you. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Antonia. I'm from the innovation media company Trending Topics, and I'm more than happy to lead you through today's and tonight's program and panel about Edtech revolution. But first of all, I would like to welcome Raphael Jochmann on the stage to say some words and to welcome you as well.
Thank you so much, Antonia. My name is Raphael. Welcome to Talent Garden. I see a lot of familiar faces. I see some new faces. I always ask questions during all the workshops and the networking sessions we had. Is it the first time for someone at Talent Garden? Wow! It's getting better because at the beginning of the year we had more hands in the air. That means our marketing is working and we're doing more or less a good job. As we know, we're the platform for explorers and innovators. This week was just amazing, and for me today is the highlight day. It's Edtech, it's really the field we try to foster our footprint in the innovation landscape of Austria. We started with a super nice innovation breakfast, full house already in the morning. Then we had some workshops, also fully booked. And now 2 events to go, and then all of exactly. Before I hand over to you again and to an amazing panel, I want to say thanks to the team. At the beginning, on Monday, I told them it will be the busiest.
All right, let's dive right into the topic. Edtech wasn't always an easy market to conquer, but a tiny little virus called Corona, we all have met it, unfortunately, turned the world upside down and literally pushed us to develop and implement innovative solutions in no time. One sector that was deeply affected by the pandemic is, and I think we all agree here, the educational sector. The European Edtech VC market increased by more than 3 times in 2021, reaching $2.5 billion by the end of the year. First question into the round to just kind of cheer you up and wake you up, actually. Who does not know GoStudent? Please raise your hand. No, you don't? Okay. Perfect, that's good. So 1 person in this whole room that is quite full. I think I don't have to say more. The Austrian unicorn GoStudent is just one of many examples for an edtech startup that experienced a rapid growth during the pandemic. Actually, we were supposed to have the director of HR operations herself with us here in this room, but unfortunately Anna Kastner couldn't join us. However, I am more than delighted to welcome the other guests to the stage. We have an amazing panel. First of all, I would call Sigrid Hantusch-Taferner, CEO and country manager Austria at the coding school Codecool, to the stage. Sigrid. Second, coming all the way from San Francisco, Trevor Hubbard, CEO and creative director of the growth and transformation company Butcher Shop. Third, coming all the way from Italia, Alessandro Braga, Chief Digital Officer at Talent Garden. And last but definitely not least, Suresh Sivanyanam, owner and managing director at Modul University Vienna. It took me a while to pronounce his last name, I'm very sorry. But here you come, Suresh. Thank you for joining me here tonight. So together we will first get a general overview over the edtech sector and market here in Austria and also internationally. Then we will discuss current and future trends and opportunities in the sector, go over and to talk about how to best scale up your edtech business, and we will conclude with a small debate about failure and fucking up. So let's dive right into it. First question, just generally. Sigrid, what are the essential ingredients of an edtech startup? What is like the secret recipe?
Yes, I can only talk for Codecool here, and I'm not sure if the mic is working, but yes, now it's working. Hi, everybody. At first, you might know Codecool. We're stationed here in Talent Garden, and we are a programming school coming with a job guarantee. So yes, and we have some kind of secret recipe. And of course, this is a high quality and innovative product, one of the most important things for every edtech startup. And the second thing is to have an immediate closeness to the market and to really listen to what the market needs. So we are mainly operating in two interest fields, and the first one, our high quality product, is of course these are our students, and we are interacting with them every day, and we are hearing their hopes and expectations that they have in starting an IT career and getting a job from us. And so this is of course something that we feel responsible for. And we really feel responsible for them getting the best education. So that's the one thing. And the other thing is, of course, the market. This has something to do with IT skills shortage. We all hear about this. And there are a lot of people talking about it, especially companies, public institutions. Everyone is talking about the lack of women in IT, about the IT skills shortage, and nevertheless, not many people are doing something against it. There are not really many hands-on and actively working solutions to it. So this is something that Codecool provides, and we are talking to those two stakeholders, naming the companies who are really interested in our students and the students all the time. And we think that is our secret recipe somehow, how we can succeed in the market here in Austria.
Thank you, Sigrid. At this point, just a brief reminder to the audience, you're very welcome to ask questions anytime you like. I want to keep it as interactive as possible also for you guys. So just raise your hand. I will try to see you and consider your question. So both Talent Garden as well as Modul University only focused on edtech at a later stage. Alessandro and Suresh, what made you embrace this trend? Why is it important? Who wants to start? Suresh?
Yeah, slide.
Oh, you don't have a mic.
I thought I was going to go second because I didn't have the mic. But so, no, sorry, I was only joking. So in terms of Modul University, I think what we've actually seen over the last sort of 2-3 years is the ability to move quickly. Because we're small, we're independent, there's a small board that effectively can make decisions. And we had to. I mean, that was the only thing. You know, the pandemic hit us in March 20. We got students over there that effectively couldn't travel, couldn't be on campus, and it was a case of how do we deliver content, how do we deliver education to those abroad. We have students from 70 different countries. Yeah, so we're an international university, we teach in English, and it's a case of how do you give them the experience of being on campus, delivering education, and also making sure that we were still complying with our accrediting authority, which is AQ Austria. So we moved to a hybrid model. So the hybrid model is effectively online and on campus, and we did that as best as we could, but without that particular model, it would have been extremely difficult for us to operate as a university, operate and deliver the education to our students, which was obviously extremely important. And during that time, obviously tech becomes an enabler. And without tech, honestly, we would have just probably fallen over. And 11 universities in the UK did fall over because they weren't quick enough to effectively to be a first mover in terms of tech. In terms of being there and being able to do what we did over here at Modul was extremely important for us. But what we've learned as well is taking it to a next level, and probably talk about that later on, but effectively looking at extended reality. So the XR model for us is our next step. So what you'll be hearing in a few months' time is that we'll be launching our first virtual reality and augmented reality delivery of our programs, which is going to be an exciting step for us.
Perfect. Keep this for later because it's going to be one of
Absolutely,
the questions. Alessandro.
Sorry.
Not sure. No, yes, okay. I mean, we at Stalin Garden, we have always been close to education, I would say. So the main change that the pandemic brought to the company was related to the scale of education in different ways. So initially we started more with an on-campus education because it was like an additive layer to the campus. What I think that really changed during the pandemic is that we somehow reverted this concept and we say, okay, you can do education and there is even a campus supporting it. So in our view, it's more that the physical space is taking care of a different kind of education. I used to call them the informal part of the education, what happens through relationship, through activities that you cannot easily replicate, neither in the metaverse, I expect, but you cannot easily replicate elsewhere. While the online part is more for delivering content, keeping interactive and whatever. And I think the technology should not just focus on the physical or the digital part, but cover both the aspects and be like the glue between the different experiences that you want to take. So, and this is where we are looking for. So trying to create experiences that they might happen online, partially integrated, because for example, right now, the format that we embrace the most is the hybrid one. And with hybrid, I mean the blended one. So a part online and a part physical, but all online or all physical to work together in the same environment.
Just like we have it right now, no? We are filmed. Hybrid model, hybrid event. Trevor. Oh, sorry, thank you.
This short one, why do you think that the hybrid is the most efficient or effective way? What is the context behind?
I mean, let me rephrase it. Honestly, I don't like so much the hybrid. So this kind of stuff where partially here, partially remote, probably the interaction is not the best one. So people that are remotely connected, they cannot interact as in the same way that we are interacting right now. So if it's a matter of inclusion of people that would have not been able to attend, it's fine. But if I want to get the most out of the experience, I think that there is an online part, an offline part, and you need to mix the best of the both worlds, honestly. And this is maybe my view because we have campuses, we have physical spaces, but trust me, there are part of the experiences that are very hard to replicate, even from just a neuroscience part of our brain, which is able to feel kind of interaction that are not easy to replicate online. But for example, if I take one of the masters that I used to coordinate in the last few years, we have seen that some modules which are mainly related with transferring content, like the UX part or the data part, they are more effective online than offline, actually. Because you can concentrate by yourself, you are all on the same tool. We provide you with the knowledge before you are onboarded on the tool itself. So it's more effective, some online part of the training compared to the offline, while there are parts of the offline world like the workshops or interaction activities that are very hard to replicate. Hybrid is the most complex to face. So I think we are not still ready. And we are not perceiving the emotions of the people that are behind the screen right now. We are not feeling the smiles, we're not seeing their faces, and even if with the best systems, it's very hard to replicate this kind of.
Especially.
Was it clear? Did I reply to your question? Partially? Yeah.
Not until we are in the metaverse, as we said. But that's another issue. Trevor, Butchershop defines itself as a team of experts in emerging sectors, technology and social behavior. What is your thought on technology applied to the educational sector and activities as well? Is it only about scalability? Can you use it for branding? Why is it important?
Yeah, I can bring a very different perspective to this panel. We have about 150 employees in North America, and in our network, about 500 people. So we're one of those companies that the pandemic forced us to shift all of the things that we celebrated and loved person to person. And I think we did a good job. And I think we figured a lot of things out. And I think it's because we made some very hard decisions, but we moved very swiftly, and we realized where the limitations of technology were and where the human component really still has mass benefit, right? So we are now a big hybrid company that works with everybody that you probably know, from Nike to Converse to Oculus to Zenefits, you know, very big Ring Central, you know, companies that we all know. And so what I have as a philosophy is that you have to look at the occasions of work, right? And not the locations. We have to become location agnostic in a lot of capacities. We all believe that. But when you analyze a company or a process or a certain sector, you have to look at the occasions of where, you know, digital optimization and tools become very relevant and where maybe they're not the best. And so in our business, we classify things that we do in 3 categories: whether you're planning, you're playing, or you're producing. And statistically speaking, 70% of our work is producing stuff, meaning people need heads down time, right? They need to be kind of alone and focused making things. 30% of the time is when you need very high, energetic, volatile collaboration, burstiness, whiteboards, the walls, all the things, you know, 30% of the time. Sometimes you're planning and sometimes you're playing. But producing was huge. So what we realized is that producing doesn't really require you to be in an office. Actually, that's where efficiency goes way down, because people are commuting, they're working, you know, between the moments of social fun and interaction. They're in the kitchen, they're going to the bar, they're whatever the hell your agency or company has, right? Ping pong. So I think it's all fun, but when you break it down very much like that, what you realize is that our entire business was designed for the 30%, or excuse me, all of our business was designed for the thing that had the least amount of occasion. So flipping that and installing really interesting things, we got rid of all our offices. We moved into utilizing technology great. We have strong policies around it's Zoom or it's a room. It's not both, right? And when you do that, I mean, we're kind of good at that. We're not as good as I want us to be. One of the other things, too, is that you reset the entire shift of where you spend money. So instead of $1 million office in San Francisco, we now take our entire employees to a different foreign country now for 5 days, because we firmly believe that you can get more benefit of 5 days together having a margarita on a beach at sunset, like the song, than you can 365 days in an office. And what I mean by that is you give social equity to the 3 months of buildup and the 3 months of that. And the one statistic that's really interesting is when we started to install these things, Slack communication between people who had never engaged with each other went up 3,000%. So you realize the high impact moments in those occasions. So that perspective, that's why I'm here. Additionally, Edtech is really interesting to us because we're seeing it as a trend in the US as well, right? And so the clients that are coming our way, not only are they trying to figure these things out, but one that I invested in, actually in the Edtech space for lawyers. And one of the things that they realized, the expense of going to conferences for continuing education, which is a requirement by law for lawyers, they have to do a certain amount of hours per year, could completely transformed into a streaming service, right, that you subscribe to. So one of the companies that I thought was in a very niche sweet spot, which is $1 billion business, was continuing education in the legal system. So things like that are very interesting fringe cases where everything of delivery and education is kind of shifting now with this new information that we have. That was long, sorry.
Question from the audience? No? Okay. But you still have physical offices, right? Because we
actually invented a concept called the pod space. So we really love Talent Garden. Actually, we have a space here. Yeah.
Promotion.
And the community is fantastic. The setup is nice. And after touring 12 spaces, we realized this was probably one of the best ones in Vienna. So congratulations there. We are, instead of having 10,000 square feet, which is about 800 square meters, 900 square meters for the conversion people in the room, okay? That's pretty good math. What we're doing is we're scaling that down to 2,000 square feet spaces in New York, LA, Chicago, Guadalajara, Mexico City, eventually Vienna, Vietnam. And the idea is that it's designed for those 30% moments of collaboration. So they're set up not with desks, but they're set up with more let's stand up and work through some things with bigger, long working tables and stuff. So we're redesigning what collaboration space looks like and making it more like a lab, but only for the occasions that we need when we fly people in and we come together or work with a client. So we're designing the business differently, and we're mapping it to our actual process rather than needing a fancy office. So it's a big project, but it's fun.
Thank you, Trevor. Let's switch to trends and opportunities of the edtech market and sector. Sigrid, what do you consider current trends of the edtech sector? What do you see?
Wow, there are so many, and we will talk about some of them today, later. Of course, it's hybrid learning, it's integrated learning, as we call it. Formerly, it was blended learning, so this is not a very new scenario, but we have learned to live it anew with COVID, with the COVID pandemic. And of course, it's kind of micro-learning, learning nuggets, all this stuff that we get from various, also language edtech offers and so on. AR, VR, we will talk about that. And there's one trend, and that we particularly have I don't know, it came to us and we implemented it, and it's not a very new trend, but it's still going on, and it's somehow really using constructivist methodology. I know this sounds complex, but it's just about leaving the students learning the stuff on their own, to keep it in simple words, because this is the only thing that really works in education in the end. You have to self-empower the students, and tech really helps us with that. We all found that out in the last few years, and so we have, I would say, a similar concept, because I would say that 30% of our students' time is with the mentors, is within workshops, is within team groups and so on. And the rest of the time is just learning by yourself and facilitated by learning platforms, by tech staff, by various, of course, learning programs that support you. And yes, this is the trend that we are following, and we are doing this since 2014. And the reason for that is that we don't have any, let's say, certificates, official certificates. Our students are not working to get a programming certificate XY. Our students are working to get a job, and they have to do this within 1 year or so. A job as a junior programmer coming from, I don't know, anything. They might have been clerks before that. They might have been, I don't know, office staff, marketing people, whatever. And how can people learn programming in 1 year? Not with frontal methodology and not with telling them what to do and taking an exam at the end. That's not how that works. We have to self-empower them. That's what we do every day, and that's how it works, project-based and learning programming by themselves.
Thank you. Alessandro, what do you consider relevant trends? How did Talent Garden respond to the edtech sector and incorporate current trends?
I mean, in this moment, I think edtech is like one of the buzzwords of the environment we are in. So I see two main trends. One is what she mentioned before, the fact of putting the education within the environment you're working in, like even the occasional way of thinking about it's really, for example, in code is easier, you know, Vera Code, there are software out there that really helps you to learn while you're doing something. So they are contextual with you, they understand what you're doing. It's way harder to do it for a manager, for example, or if you have to work on more soft skills. But I think that mainly the tech sector will go towards this kind of approach, so putting the way of learning directly in your tools. So there is no better tool to learn UX than Figma. And if you have an instructor within the product you're using, you're learning a lot because you're building a product while learning how to use it. For the non-tech, the trend that I'm looking after is the conversational training. There are a couple of companies, one is Skillgym, for example, in Switzerland, and some others that are really building through AI conversational learnings. So maybe you have to talk about inclusion and diversity, you have to talk about sustainability, and it seems a real conversation in real life, and then gives you feedback in the way that usually a machine is able to give you feedback, so very clear and very constructive somehow, without biases and without the, or at least with the bias of the algorithm, of the person who wrote the software, but at least with the idea of helping you in a real case scenario where it's very hard to have a person assisting you. So if you tell me which is the real potential of the technology, I think it's really to scale the educational sector and to give the people the freedom to learn in different ways, which was not, I mean, the reality before. Because if you think about the scholar system, I mean, it's like putting information in your head for some years and then, I mean, evaluating somehow the way you learn. But it's really being there when you need it, which is the contextual part, and then conversation, so helping you to have a real, I would say, support. And we're going to do a couple of tests, for example, and we did it in the past, I think it was 2017 or 18. For example, in adding conversation for master students to help them practicing, for example, what will happen when they will return to the company. So having a hard conversation with your CEO about what innovation is, or which is your approach to sustainability. And this is a very interesting trend, I think, in the Edutech market.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. Yeah, Trevor, you want to say something?
I come from a very different place, yeah? So it's just that I'm seeing things a little bit differently. One of the statistics that I think is staggering and alarming, and to support that, climate change is becoming a very big topic, right? We all know that. And it's because I think it's affecting pocketbooks now, and now people are starting to really pay attention. Cool. Okay, we all understand that. The second alarming thing that I think is happening is that in the United States, per capita student debt is $32,000 per person. Okay? It's the highest in the world. Okay? The second alarming statistic, during the pandemic, and now that we're kind of coming out of the pandemic, applications to universities dropped 29%. It's the lowest drop in the history of college education in the United States. What is that signaling to us? Change is happening. Evolution is starting to happen. People are getting probably what they want, what I call on the courtyard sessions, the courtyard education. They can find anything they want to do. Any designer we have can go learn any skill set they want in a day, you know, if they look for it. So I think the really interesting trend for me is what that does to institutions. I know it's been not as a serious issue because we've always had the back cushion of these great institutions, and no matter what, everyone's going to prefer to have the college experience. That's what we assume. But is that true now? And so the hypothesis, I think, is that it's changing. The other trend I see, which is really interesting, we're implementing. We went and acquired a Web3 digital agency in Guadalajara during the pandemic. And one of the things was to prep a little bit for what's coming in the digital age and what's happening with the metaverse and Web3 and blockchain and NFT. And so some of the things that I see being applied, which are really cool, are smart contracts and NFTs, where it comes to the content as curriculum being shared as a source of revenue for not only the teachers and the creators, but the students themselves. So instead of doing the old models of subscriptions and paying the hand over fist, there's this really interesting thing happening now where the reward system in these microeconomies can spin up very quickly. We're implementing blockchain technology into a social podcasting tool. So the creator of the podcast owns the content and can split the revenue with the potential advertiser and partner. So we're already experimenting. You got to follow the money in everything. Like, these are all things where you follow where people are looking for personal wealth, where they're trying to find a job, but it always comes to the place of, like, how am I sustaining my life? How am I sustaining this part of the world or business? So I think it's an interesting trend. That's all I can offer.
Yeah, Suresh, I see you moving. Like, I mean, Trevor mentioned a university enrollment drop. How do you, like, as an institution, as a university, respond to this kind of trends, or what do you see important in this matter?
That's a really good point. I think one of the things that we are seeing is, will there be universities in the future? As it's saying. So we, as at Modul, are looking at what the future 5-10 years is going to hold. Are we going to have campuses? Are we going to have what they call a university, providing a bog standard degree. So one of the things that we did over the last 12 months is looked at our programs, looked at how we were delivering those programs, but more importantly, giving the student choice. So what we did with one of our foundation courses is to rehash it to make it look a bit like Netflix, make it look a bit like Apple Music. So effectively you have a playlist and they can choose what programs they want. They can effectively look at that playlist, and this is who we're targeting. We're targeting a different generation who don't actually want to be sitting in a classroom listening to a lecturer or a professor or whatever it is. They want to effectively say, look, I want choice. I want to be able to choose what I want to learn, but effectively within the confines of the accreditation in terms of degrees, and that's the future for us. So that's what we're moving towards, effectively, is saying, right, we understand. My kids are like 21 and 18, so I'm always feeding off them in terms of, look, tell me what's going on. How do you want to? They're going, look, Daddy, DM me. And I was like, what? But that's the kind of thing that would. So I'm like, listen, you know what? Fine. But this is how we're interacting with our students. At the end of the day, what we're saying is, how do we communicate with them? They don't want to be emailed. Yeah, they're looking at a DM, they're looking at a WhatsApp, they're looking at a Snap. That's what they're looking at. And if we aren't in tune with them, that's where effectively we're going to lose stuff going on. So a few things that we did. Whole new campus management system, actually from the US, which we brought on board. We're the first in Europe to do it, because it means that we can engage more with our students, and we can look at trends, we can look at their learning in terms of how they're learning, to then feed back to them to say, right, okay, you know what, you've been looking at this particular subject more than that particular subject. This is where you're trending in terms of your other peer group. It's that kind of thing that, it's the gamification. Yeah, that's what we're looking at, is gamification. Kids these days want to be able to say, look, you know what, I'm up here, you're whatever there, but I want to know where I'm pitching at. So we're making that look and feel experience a lot more, in trend. So that was one of the programs in terms of the campus management side of things. That's what we did. A few months ago, we launched our own record label as well. So I'm a big hip hop fan, right? So a big hip hop fan, going back into the 80s. Exactly. We'll talk about that in a sec. But so when I was growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, hip hop, R&B was my thing, and I loved music. But I used to play vinyl, right? So I used to DJ. Yeah, I've got the vinyl sets back there. We'll do that later on. No, so I used to carry these big boxes all over. I used to go to New York. I didn't DJ in New York. I wish I could have DJed in New York, but never did. And but it was these massive boxes, all vinyl. And then my son also DJs now as well, but he carries a little stick. Yeah, that's basically it. And he will travel around the world, does whatever he wants to do. But the point of the record label was this. The delivery of education in terms of us at Modul is that we want to sign up artists. The artists are effectively the lecturers and professors around the world that are now part of our label. We launched our first album 2 months ago. And effectively, the reason why we launched the album is now we're in talks with distributors. So the likes of Spotify, the likes of Apple Music are now effectively not only delivering music content, it's education content as well. So that's the power in terms of using what's already out there and saying, we'll do the content, but we want a different distribution tech platform to effectively be up with trend. And that's basically it. Just coming back to the point, exactly agree with Trevor. I don't think that universities are going to be around for that long in the format that they are at the moment. You've got to change, and that's where tech comes into it.
Exactly, and this is where I want to ask a question to you, but also to the audience. How likely do you think that instead of showing a simple video, the professors of the future are just going to use AR goggles to immerse their students into the Stone Age, for example? Raise your hand if you think that's like a reasonable scenario for the future. That's another question to discuss. If we are happy with that or not. But you mentioned something about ER, like a project of yours, Modul University. So what do you think about this metaverse, the future of the metaverse? And
well, sitting on my desk at the moment is for me to sign off, and with our American partners, I think what we've seen is we're looking at, that's the future, right? So ultimately looking at AR and VR the whole XR thing, I'm just saying a lot of R's, right, because I want to sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I leave that to my IT team to do. But the key thing about it is when I experience this, that is what you want to do. You want to be able to deliver content, immerse that student in a environment which gives them not only the virtual reality stuff, but effectively the reality stuff, which is you can be part and parcel of what's happening around you. I'll give you an example. So Vietnam, we talked about Vietnam. And we were discussing about how we provide training. So most of you may know that Madul University is well known for Madul School, which is tourism, hospitality, that's what, and sustainability. So that's what we're well known for, from the school and obviously now the university. So a lot of governments will reach out to us and say, look, can you effectively provide training and education to the hotel sector or to our public sector organizations with hospitality? One of the things that we're looking at the world moment is English with regards to the World Cup that's coming up. So it's all training things that we do with governments as well. However, there's always been one situation, which is you can deliver content online, but the problem is training facilities. So we then thought, okay, we can't always find a hotel, we can't always find a training school in a particular area or a remote area. What do? So that's the reason why we've now gone into XR. So ultimately, we kitchens and training hotels in a virtual reality space. So that's what I'm signing off, and that's what we'll effectively be launching, where ultimately we can provide this experience in terms of training, in terms of you don't actually have to move anywhere, but you'll immerse yourself into a kitchen, you'll immerse yourself into a hotel, because effectively it's about delivering education to those who, one, can't afford it. Second is effectively who you just can't get to particular towns, or the students. I was in Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka before all the troubles that were happening over the last, currently now, but 2-3 months ago, to launch this particular project. So ultimately going into areas, and what we're doing is helping countries. Because these are countries that are ultimately who rely on tourism, they rely on hospitality, but effectively it's about training. So this is where Edtech is extremely powerful, and literally, that's going to be signed off, and we're hoping to be the first university in Europe with partners in America, and there's 11 universities in America at the moment that are currently using XR technology, but mainly for medicine. Yeah, so medicine is the area where that particular technology is being used at the moment. Now we're trying to bring it to the different areas in terms of developing that. And while Edtech is really important, one of the other things that we're doing at Madul is medtech. So we're looking at, we're talking about Edtech here, but there is another link to medtech where we're developing wearables which update your stats. So what's your blood pressure? What's your pulse? What's your this? It's all of this tech. So everything related to tech and the education piece it's so very important, but it relates to another piece, which is the medtech. I think there was a question.
Yeah, exactly. There was a question from the audience.
Sorry, just a couple of things, because my part of the world is trying to translate all of this for parents. Sort of like the young sector, and the generation gap is getting wider, faster. But it's generally parents who are trying to decide, and kids who are heading in this direction because they love it. I heard already, I think 2 years ago in Ho Chi Minh at an Edtech conference, that the middle group of universities were going to die. You know, like what you're doing seems to be the big push forward. You talked about accessibility now, though. Does that mean, because Madul's private, right? Yeah. So does that mean it's getting cheaper with delivery of things like XR and that sort of thing? The accessibility, is it going to make it, so students don't have to go into student debt? Is it going to make education more accessible and cheaper by using the tech?
Well, I think the key thing about cost is really important, because what we're seeing is that, I mean, we're always slightly in a different place because we have a slightly different demographic that we have at the particular university. But in terms of looking at other campuses that we have, for example, in Dubai and also in Nanjing as well, we do understand that cost becomes an issue. And it's a case of any organization to say, look, do we need to be paying X amount on a campus? Do we need to effectively have that fixed overhead, which effectively we don't need? And ultimately, there will be a reduction in cost, because what we can see, and certainly things that we have done over the past certainly 12 months, is that as you mentioned, parents. Parents are the ones who are effective. For undergrads, they're the ones who are paying for the fees. So they want every single possibility and option that we can give them to reduce cost or to find a different way of effectively paying for that fee as well. So before 2-3 years ago, it would be, right, pay up front, do this, do that. Now we've had to change all of that. We've effectively got to realize that there's a pandemic that everyone's been through. It's a lot tougher. You know, my family live in San Diego, so obviously it's one of those things where I can see that student debt that ultimately that is being accrued. So the things that we're doing is like looking at offering scholarships, looking at how we can effectively provide installment programs as well in terms of, so we're doing a different way, but ultimately it's about reduction of cost. Our costs are reducing, and we have to reduce our costs because we're a private university and we have to remain profitable.
One thing also that I think is I'm a parent too with small kids, so I get it. I think technology typically goes premium before it becomes parity, right? And that's kind of the curve. Like, remember when the Tesla Roadster came out and it was like $190,000, and now you can buy a Model 3 for 35 grand, right? It took a decade or more to do that, but things become premium because you're essentially paying the backs of people to figure out how to do it less with more general applications to reduce it. So I feel like there will be a lot of frontiers happening right now that are very expensive, but it should taper. That's how it works.
I mean, there's models in South America where before iPads were ridiculous, you know, in education, but now there are blended models where kids are accessing
Sure.
just publicly and blanket-wise. I get that. Are we talking eventually about a virtual university?
Well,
The whole setup comes. The whole setup comes in a box.
The virtual campus. The virtual campus. Well,
Headset with controller.
but it was actually quite interesting. It was I forgot who mentioned the point, but the problem with a virtual university is that I think it's a general thing about life and business. We still want to interact. Yeah, we still want to see people. We still want to effectively meet people. That's
I'm
so.
asking because the first pure online schools are now running and are accredited.
Yeah. They are, and we actually deal with a few of the pure online schools that, and what we do is we get feedback from, you know, the likes of K-12 and all this stuff in terms of where they are. Ultimately, what is the experience for the student? And what we're seeing is that pure online or perfect is there, but it's still going to be blended to a point where they are going to go and sit in a room. They're going to see their peers. They're going to effectively be in there. I don't think we'll ever get to a purely 100% virtual VR campus, but we're certainly going to be heading in that direction.
That's why I think it's a hybrid of occasions, right? Like, if you can deliver 90% of the education virtually and have pulse checks every other month for a week where the whole team gets together and it's part of the education to swarm and come together, think about the reduction in costs and things that you could do if you focus on the occasions, and you can change that. You can still, in hospitality, you can still have people do the majority of training and then come together for the things they need to do, right?
And that just goes back to the question in terms of have we been able to reduce costs?
I really like the division. I think if schools would take the same approach and look at productivity planning and play, we could actually have some really good schools.
Absolutely, but in terms of the cost that you mentioned earlier on, you're able to reduce costs immediately in terms of people not having to travel around.
Yeah,
that's a major cost saving.
Sigrid, could you imagine to immerse Codecool into the metaverse, or what is your perspective on the influence of AR on the edtech sector?
Well, of course, I would like to. And in my former life, I was part of a company who actually produced AR and VR scenarios, and we did some science on it. I mean, it was for private academies and not for universities. But still, we found out that VR scenarios can be even more immersive than real-life role games. Yes, we did some user experience on that. And this is the reason is because it's always the same scenario, and we don't know the person, and we just can't do our usual communicative tricks with this person. It's just like the client that we meet in the reality. So yes, there are many positive indicators for it. Yes, I think we don't have to talk about AR and how useful it is in the tech sector, in the industry, and so on. So it's coming. Concerning VR, we still have to think of the tech barriers. we might not forget this because people very soon get frustrated if something doesn't work, or if the AI doesn't really recognize your speech at once, or your language or anything. So this is something that we also found out in this whole user experience scenario. At the moment, it's good to have some coaches. So if you're talking about, I don't know, it was kind of schooling kitchen scenarios or something like that, it's good to have some coaches there who are really in the scenario and help people with the tech stuff, and maybe even do some things that the AI would do if it was properly working. Yes. Yeah.
It's a really interesting point, because when you look at the training kitchen in terms of a virtual reality position, cutting an onion and the texture of that onion, and it may seem like a small thing, but you just can never be able to deliver that in that sort of extended reality. But it's a small thing, but it's a really important thing, especially for our chefs who are teaching. They're like, well, there's only so much you can do. How, when they cut an onion, how are they going to feel it and all that? So there is, just going back to the point, you are always going to need an element of where that skill and that feel you just can't generate. You just cannot effectively do it unless you're in that reality, in the reality.
Yeah, totally. So I think, of course, to make it completely happen, and it's course intensive, yes. So if you're a big private university, wow, I envy you. You can make it happen. We as Codecool, I think we will have our mentor bots for some more years, yes. But of course, we are working on scenarios like that because yes, it's a small step from a platform to a VR module, and so it will go step by step, and I'm sure about that.
Yes, Trevor, you want to, or Alessandro? No.
Oh, yeah. One of the cool things that we did is when Facebook acquired Oculus came to us and said, we need help defining a meaningful connection in VR. So one of the projects we worked on some years ago, before it became MetaQuest and all the cool stuff, right? We worked on the actual first Oculus Rift, and then we worked on what came after that, which was the more sort of untethered, cooler devices with the touch controllers and everything. But one of the things to unite their developers, to unite their, partner content creators, the game producers, all of the other folks, no one had a very narrow, interesting mechanical definition of what a meaningful connection was in virtual reality. So some of those things, I think, were really interesting studies, but one of the biggest things is that one of the biggest things is that the value of that experience needs to be almost rooted in something you couldn't do in the real world. If you try to replace the real world in a VR environment, you will fail, right? So there's a really interesting advantage that the need for that technology needs to be transparent. It needs to be known why you would be in there. So I think you guys are very right in matching the moment with an alternative, not because it's a cool trick or a gimmick, or you're doing something that just is a different sensation. There's a whole stream coming now down of what this whole meaningful connections in VR and AR will be. It's a 180-page document, so I'm not going to go into all the other things that were part of it, but I think that's interesting.
Indeed. Alessandro, do you want to say something to this topic, or shall we switch?
They said, they covered almost everything, but the point that I see, especially replying to you about, is this the world that we want? As father of two daughters, honestly, I would love to study in this world, and I would love them to study in a world where they can blend the activity in a classroom or whatever it is. They can have a chemistry book where they can see formulas popping up from the book and understanding how elements mix together, and they can have a laboratory close to home to make it real. I think that those three elements should stay together. A lot of schools, the public ones, are not able to afford laboratories right now, for example. So it's a matter of cost. Books are very old and they're not attractive for young guys right now. They prefer to spend their time in the metaverse or whatever it is, in Minecraft or whatever it is. So my point is that rather than acting as parents and choosing what is best for our, for the next generation, probably we should step back and let them understand what they really want. So, for example, what I'm doing with the young one, she's 11 right this year. I will bring her to summer school in order to learn how to code Metaverse or how to code Minecraft. Because the moment that she understands the logic behind, she will be able to learn or to get the most out of the experiences that she's going to do. So my point is that we were born in another world. So we are just a transition generation in that one. I suggest not to judge or not to enter too much in the way they will learn, because probably they will be able to shape it better than we can do for themselves. That's my point of view, honestly.
There are two questions. Yes?
To meet the world right now, I wanted to ask all of you, do you think that in future physical professors are still needed?
Yes, they are. They will. They are, and they will probably. There will be artists. There will be
robots,
entertainers, probably.
You know what? That's a really contentious thing. I'm going to take that back to my faculty. So this, I think, and it will be, of course, because it's about content. Yeah. So ultimately, however you deliver it, and however you are looking at education, someone needs to effectively produce that content, and that's one of the most important things that we're looking at in terms of education.
The mic.
In terms.
Mic.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah.
Is that better? Sorry. Apologies.
From the idea was to train an avatar based on the knowledge of a professor.
Yeah.
In future, and this is then a professor could teach at scale. For everybody in Metaverse.
It's really interesting because one of our students has actually done this, yeah, and it didn't go down too well with our faculty. So, but the avatar that this person developed was exactly what you're saying there, to effectively be able to move that avatar around to effectively teach at different locations, different subjects, and obviously move around really easily than a professor can, for example. But there is so much to it, but ultimately I think it goes back to this point. I really don't think that we'll get there 100% in terms of without that personal contact. That will always, for me, it will always be there. It's a bit like business. When I say to my kids, I said, when I was doing business 20 odd years ago, the way you close a deal is you get on a plane, you get on a train, you get on a car, and you go and meet that person. You sit in front of them, and you close that deal. You shake their hands. Before you've left that door, the deal's done. Here, it's about email, not even speaking to the person, and trying to close the deal. And I think we are going back to the whole thing about that personal touch. So there will always be an element of a personal touch. I don't think we'll ever get rid of it.
Okay, question. Hands raising.
I think there's certain subjects and information that teachers will become obsolete. And I think with the advent of AI and machine learning, I think there's certain verticals of knowledge where you can revive a text and have the AI just learn that antiquated text to then put it into a way that it can be taught. You know, there's all kinds of applications. I think when it comes to what AI can't do is think and develop new concepts yet, right? And I think like there's a not what? I said that, not yet, right? Which is scary. But I think we all need, I'm going to take a step back and just watch the show and see what happens, because I don't know if I can fundamentally answer. I can know what I want, which is teachers and real life experience. That's what I want. But what ends up happening, I don't know. I think it's a wild, wild west right now, and it's going to get scary. Yeah, sorry.
There's another question.
I want to ask this because we do the Edtech software as a service. Basically, we're trying to bring hands of features, and what I believe the future might be one day, basically that the teacher is kind of like a guide through the things. Sorry. I believe that the teachers will still play some kind of role, very important. We try to free their hands of the unnecessary stuff, because most of the teachers right now are as well the secretaries, and they do the handle the paperwork and stuff. So let's get rid of these. And but plus, it's still the mission for them. So I believe that they're very important. But on the same time, we should use the technologies and everything what is on there, and not to try to pretend that it doesn't exist, because the kids or even teenagers, they face it, they live it. So I believe that maybe the future role of teacher, even now, should be to actually show kids or young adults what is a good way, or where is the limit actually of these things, and what are the opportunities and options. And they might be one day maybe more of the tour guides through all of this life experience, right? So this is what I see. I still see the future of teachers there, but they might have another role than just a frontal telling you the monarchs one by one, right?
Yeah, actually, I really like what you're saying there, because this is what we're also experiencing at Codecool, because we had some kind of team event, some focus day 2 weeks ago, and there was the question, so mentors, what's keeping you from mentoring? Because it's always, we cannot do mentoring, so what's keeping you from mentoring? And then what came up was the personal problems of the students. They have personal problems. They have problems with motivation. They feel overwhelmed. They are coaching our students. This is what they are also doing. I mean, besides mentoring, besides a lot of mentoring, of course, because not all the questions are at the moment in the internet or on the learning platform, and also the methodology is one point. But this whole coaching scenario and guiding them through their learning experience, this is something deeply human. And I know we can program an AI, and I also talked to some, I don't know, virtual coach once and tried it out, but in the end, I mean, I have to tell you, and it's also, I also have 2 kids, yes, and my son is all into computers, 12 years old, and so on, and really hard to talk to. But when he really has a problem, he's turning to me, and not in some virtual world, and trying to solve his problem. So yes, I think you're right, and this is where we humans, we are needed still. Yeah.
Can I just also add very quickly to that, because it's interesting. I'm glad that GoStudent aren't here, because we're launching our own tutoring business as well. So one of the things is that we did part of our feasibility is that 70% of those asked in terms of for tutoring want that one-on-one. So I think it was a point earlier on. Sorry.
In the back? I have a question.
Yeah.
Here.
Thank you. My name is Linda, and I have 5 children. I mean, they're all adult women today. And the one thing that I will tell you is the first 3 were raised in California. Then we moved to Graz, and we moved in a time where I thought I was in another world. And I will tell you what I've observed over the last 25 years. First thing, I love technology, especially deep tech. And I'm an investor, and I move into it, and I support young talent. But I will tell you, when it comes to AI, what I think, what we have to keep in mind is the humanity. Humanity. You can't, a machine can't teach those kind of emotions. But what I would like to see, when the programming is going even better, I would like children to know, and I'd like the teachers to teach cultural differences, and help to create an inclusive, barrier-free world. Because unfortunately, when I'm an observer, I live here, so I know what I'm talking about. There are major differences, and although we talk about inclusivity, and although we talk about this, and we do our best in Europe, and I'm a half European and half Californian girl still, I will tell you that watching when my daughters came here from the ages 8, 10, and 12, and the transformation, and thank God we fought for a bilingual school at the time they were in school, but it was a huge shock. And I think the teachers' teaching methods at that time, and what I'm observing today with my grandchildren, and my granddaughter's 21, and she's in university, but what I'm observing today, that humanity of cultural difference and respect. That's what I would challenge the teachers in Europe to keep a focus on, because it's important. There is an organization called Europe 101, and it's for the future leaders, and they created that to help create humanity. And I think it's really important for us not to forget teachers are important. Teachers are important for guidance, but most important, we need international teachers all over the world, because today we have global citizens. It's no longer just being Austrian or California girl. Today we're global, we're traveling, and we're moving very fast. Those are just my comments as a grandmother of 9 kids and mother of 5, but I just wanted to just put it out there that the humanity part is what I'm looking for. And we are all humans, but we can learn better with AI technology, and we can actually develop better programming and concepts, but not to forget the humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. One round of applause. I think there was a question from you as well, or was it covered already? Okay.
Just in terms of the elements here coming forward, I think it was a gentleman from SecLab this morning from Madrid who just simply said, don't forget that if you're going to set up an EdTech startup, make sure that in your team you have people who understand the ed part, the edu. And I think that is, I mean, I've been dealing with teachers for 30 years, and that's a very powerful point right there. The education is the key, the tech is the aid in many ways.
Another question?
Yeah, okay, you can hear me well. I just wanted to say this was a really nice input and a really nice comment. And I also want to bring up the topic of fake news, basically, because we've seen the rise of information also comes with a dark side to it. Namely, everybody has access, but everybody also can plant information, and it can be distributed without it being able to be controlled. So my question kind of is like, could this also happen to AIs? Like, we might have better access to schools. We might have more equality in what is being distributed. But if we take that human factor out, might it be that we could see AI teachers rise that just distribute misinformation?
Alessandro?
It might happen. So until there is a human, maybe with a contract, which is based on delivering a product in the shortest time possible, it might happen that the AI is biased, the content is biased, and whatever. And I think the point that we raised before, it's exactly like that. So we should train and teach our, or the new generation, more about critical thinking than just receiving information from the outside in. That's the point. And the more the technology goes towards the direction of the speed and the scalability, the more there is the risk of a bias or a situation like the one that described. And we cannot avoid it, but honestly, there was I mean, if I recall 30 years ago, or 25 years ago, when you have enough, I mean, like advertisers, they should cover like the area or the schedule of the TV night during the dinner, for example, 8 to 8:30. They broadcast you the right information, then you find the right product in the supermarket on the right shelf and you buy it. That was a bias, exactly like the one that you have in AI right now. So it was your critical thinking not to get the information from the outside in as it was, and not to buy the product that was the first one on the shelves. And whatever it's built for scalability and maybe processing and making money usually gets some kind of bias within. So it's something that is part of this world, and we should train the children to understand it. And trust me, if you spend time explaining them, for example, the algorithm of Instagram or those things, they immediately understand. That's an information that, I mean, is here because they want to test if I reply to this message. Even if they are 12 or 14, because I mean, they're born with this technology in their hands, so they understand it. If you have a comfortable conversation about the topic. So it's Instagram, it's a good product, but at the end of the day, it's there to build desires, to build needs, or is there to do other things that generally are there to make money, which is fine. I'm not against the point itself. I'm against the fact that you should not take whatever you see on an internet as it is.
The issue of fake news is also kind of closely related to the topic of data protection, which kind of relates to my next and almost last question, because it's a tough discussion and but we still have a few minutes left. So
at the end, so
a study by the Human Rights Watch recently detected that the majority of Edtech platforms actually violates children's privacy by using their data for other purposes than educational ones, such as advertising. How do you see the risk here? Like a question into the round. How do you evaluate this kind of barrier in terms of Edtech platforms? Have you experienced barriers like this or difficulties with the subject in your business?
I think GDPR is a big thing in any case, and one of the most important areas for us as a university is in terms of how the data is controlled, where it's held, looking at everything around security. And one of the things that when we were actually dealing with our US partners with regards to our new campus management system, GDPR, in accordance with our own accrediting authority over here, is where are those servers being held? What's the security around it? Jurisdictions becomes another issue, and it is a absolute important area because of data protection. The interesting thing about this is that back in the UK, my other business is healthcare, so healthcare and GDPR are even more important, especially now. So what we are doing at the university is looking at how we're effectively being guided by healthcare GDPR and trying to instill the same within the education, because there's a lot more tighter when it comes to the healthcare side of things. But when you get it wrong, you can get it badly wrong. So definitely an area that we need to concentrate on, and we can see it, in terms of what people are storing on their phones. This is the big thing, doing a snap, which, and ultimately this is the thing that it doesn't matter what you do in terms of education. Some people change passwords, do this, do that, and everything else. It's always a huge risk.
One of the things that I think every founder and every company that's starting up needs to become first is an identity security company first. What I think is really intriguing about that is that if you're building software or platform, and let's assume there's users, knowing and starting with that identity layer and making that secure is the best way for you to then build from, right? So it's a huge topic, and there are companies that I think are doing this incredibly well, but if you start with that layer, everything else gets a little bit easier. Access, security, identity, scalability, databases, software as a service, everything starts to play. So I would say that if you start with identity and security, these things become really interesting, rather than a GDPR fringe case that comes in late and bites you in the ass because you forgot about it. That's happened, right? So, yeah.
Okay, one more question.
I have a question about the future, the near future. The Udemy Turkish co-founder said something like 10 years ago that around 2050 only 10 universities will survive because of the whole digital disruption and digital transformation. What do you think about the university, the whole educational model in 2050? How could it look like?
So in 2050, I'll be 30. I'm just trying to work it. No, so I am trying to work. You're not supposed to laugh at that.
Sorry.
So I think one of the things, and like we've discussed this during the conversation. I think that the whole model in terms of what universities are going to look like and what they will change as far as I'm concerned. And it's a really interesting point in terms of every question that's been asked today is, I think it's going to be driven by the student. It's going to be driven by the next generation in terms of what education actually looks like, because ultimately we have to be in tune with what they want. And we can't prescribe it, but I believe that in terms of the question that you're asking me about whether there is going to be a finite amount of universities that will survive, I think there will. And who will survive? It'll be Ivy League. It's going to be it's going to be basically the Cambridges, the Oxfords. Those are going to survive because they have a brand. And there was a statistic the other universities, or effectively the Cambridges or Oxfords, do not advertise ever for 30 years. That brand will survive because they have developed over if it's going to be any university, traditional university that will survive, those universities.
$100 billion endowments.
Absolutely. Well, that's the other thing as well. Yeah, that's where I could see it happening. Other universities, other institutions will definitely change. Not have to. Not definite. They will. Yeah. They will have to.
I can't recall exactly the numbers. But I was dealing with one of the Edtech investors in Europe, and he told me, like, if we measure now the need, so the demand for high skills and graduation, we are in a moment where we should be like 400 new universities per year just to cope with the demand, which is not happening. So more than asking ourselves, is there a future for university? I would say, how the education will look like and which is the role that university will play, because they're not growing at the pace that is needed by the demand. So rather than just change, probably they need to change the way they teach. Probably there will be an Oxford and Codecool, I would say, training program for developers, because they need to partner with someone else, basically because they're not up to date with the technology and the way of learning. They're not up to date with the content, and they're not up to date with the demand. So those are, in my view, the three reasons. But again, what I suggest you to do is not to look at the university as the traditional or the only way to scale the educational part.
Somebody's calling.
So Vienna is calling you. What's up, Fede? Fede, you have a question from a person here.
Maybe that's the sign that
no.
we're coming to an end now.
That's the tech part. No, that was meta
running out of
guys.
time. How are we? Federico, how are we with the time? Do we still have time for one more question? Okay, one more question and then I have a last question for you to conclude.
Which is your appreciation, or which role do you think that blockchain technology will play in the Edutech?
So I'll actually answer that, because blockchain is big within Moodle at the moment, and out of all of the programs that we're delivering, it's blockchain, it's effectively look at crypto, because this is, and NFTs, this is what students, they want. They know about it. They know about blockchain, they know about crypto, they know about NFTs, and they are driving those particular programs forward. How will it effectively be part of education going forward, not only as a program in terms of developing the knowledge of that particular area as well, but certainly within security. That's another side of things that we're looking at as well, is how we're using blockchain to look at the security aspects in terms of actually choosing and picking and choosing your programs, and in terms of identity, another thing as well. But so it's been certainly within our university, it's being driven by the students, and this is actually something which is a touch point, which is us being able to change with what the students want. If we talk about, I might talk about something else to the students, and they're like, well, that was like 25 years ago. Why are you talking to me about that? Why are you talking about that for? But talk to me about NFTs, I'll know it inside out. It's that kind of thing. So definitely it's the area certainly for us that's really big at the moment.
All right, so we're almost coming to an end. If you can lead the further discussions afterwards in a networking session, but I want to conclude with one brief and very, very, very fast round. I want to know from each of you the number one ingredient or step to scale up an edtech. Since we are in the edtech industry and the focus is there, maybe there are some founders in the round or also online watching. What can you recommend? What is your number one advice?
For me, it's always partnerships and distribution. So using a distribution channel, certainly from my perspective as a university, we can only scale up and distribute with partners who are already there.
Sigrid?
Yes, and maybe to say something different, because I really like this, and we need it as well. But for us, it's our corporate culture. It's very important when we scale up, because no one is talking about the hard work of the people that try to scale up, that try to reach goals, that try to make it happen. And many of us are working 10, 12 hours a day to make it happen. We feel responsible for it from the beginning, and even a mentor or someone working in the office was there from the beginning, and they know all the stuff about the company and what is needed. So having a strong corporate culture with flat hierarchies, with the possibility of growth mindset and giving feedback to each other, transparent feedback. We are also having a trial for it 4 days a week now. Then you can really also scale up in a healthy way and not just, let's say, use people for growing, yes?
Thank you. Trevor?
I think it'll always, for me, come down to audience and customer, knowing them so well and not making assumptions and making surprises, but truly listening and truly developing and designing for the audience, the intended person, right? That's huge. Second one, sorry, it's one, but two, I think clarity above everything else, whether you practice that in your culture, with your customer, with your team. Clarity is the thing that when it's there, you increase the chance of success. When it's not, you increase the chance of failure. So I think clarity is a very big one.
Clarity. And Alessandro, last words.
I think that we as an ecosystem, we as Talent Garden, we need to play a role with the ecosystem, with the entire ecosystem. So education is not something that a single company will solve. So it's really bringing all the partners together and acting more like as a glue rather than a company that wants just to collect money out of it.
Perfect words to conclude. I'm really thankful for this great discussion. Really, it was exciting. Yeah, it doesn't happen so often that you continue talking and talking. However, we will continue this after. And now, for those of you who want to know how to beat failure before failing, there's another second session coming up right now here on the stage, featured by Butcher Shop, and Trevor will be here as well, with some other speakers. It starts, I think, in about 10 or now. Okay, it starts now because you talked so much. I'm sorry. But I will see you afterwards for the aperitivo. Okay, great. Thank you so much.